I've been a full-time illustrator for almost 5 years now, but I have a tiny confession to do, and it's that I barely do any client work anymore. I've done books, I've done commissions, I even had a print store, but none of that gave me real stability, and I always was looking for a new project. Then I started selling my own Procreate brushes, and they have been paying my rent ever since. So today I'm showing you how I make one from scratch, because this completely changed how I make money as an artist, and I think it could work for you too. But first, let me tell you how I got here, because it wasn't a straight line. Here's the thing about client work. It's not bad. I love working on books, and back then I did a ton of commissions, but every time a project ended, I had to start looking for clients once again, and it was never ending. I spent 10 years building an audience on Instagram, and when things started working, I thought that it would be my safety net. If I had followers, work would keep coming, and sometimes it did, but not enough and not consistently. I thought about finding an agency, but honestly, I don't really like someone else deciding the work I should take, and it doesn't even mean that I will have constant work, so I decided to discard it. I also had a print and sticker store, and actually they were pretty nice, and I really liked having it until Copic hit. And everything went down. I had to close the store because shipping was paralyzed. Also, the shipping costs suddenly became a lot higher, custom duties, and it stopped being profitable. Even though the show wasn't going perfect, it was still a side job back then because I was working as a full-time designer. So it wasn't really a problem until I was laid up and I had to find out what I wanted to do. So I kept working every day on my drawings and on my Instagram until I found the key, and it was digital products. Things that I could sell without worrying about shipping, about inventory, and any of that. But not just any digital product. I tried a few things before I found the one that really worked for me, and it wasn't really what I was expecting. I started doing art while on DeviantArt, and I've always been fascinated by those artists who made resources like free brushes, textures, tools, and honestly, I always downloaded every free resource that I could find, but barely any of them I could use because I don't know, it wasn't my style. So when I got the iPad, I started using Procreate, but at that time I was using Paint.LC and also Photoshop, and it was Paint.LC. I had one brush that I loved so much that I just lost it. So looking in Procreate, I saw that I could customize my own brushes, and I started trying things and recreating that brush. And that one was my first custom brush. It was just for me. At that time, during the pandemic, that I was looking for a new job and what to do with my art and try to improve my Instagram and all of that and creating digital works, I thought that maybe I could sell this one and see what it happens. So I made my first brush bag, and it actually went much better than expected. And I think it was not because there was a lot of brushes, because the bag was kind of small, but because the brushes felt so personal. It was like looking at my own work through them, and I think that really clicked with people. That's why I keep working that way. And that's when I realized something most people get wrong when selling brushes, and I think it's something that makes all the difference. Because here's the truth, making brushes is simple, but making brushes that actually people will pay for them, that's another thing. So here's why most packs don't sell. It's actually pretty easy to make a pack with a lot of brushes, but you just duplicate them, change a few settings, rename them, and yeah, you have a new brush. And you keep doing that. Change the textures and all of that. You don't even need to check if they work because yeah, you just want to make a lot of brushes. But doing that, it doesn't even mean that anyone will want to buy them or the brushes are good or anyone will even want to use them. So when someone downloads a free brush pack that has dozens of brushes in there, they will just skim and try a couple brushes. Maybe they will find something, maybe they will not. So yeah, that brush pack will get deleted or maybe forgot, and they will get a new one. But when someone finds a brush that it feels personal, that it feels that it has made for them, it's completely different. And I can assure you that they will pay for it and that they will use it every day. So that's why my packs have so few brushes, because I take my time with every single one of them to make them feel like I really want to work with these brushes. If I only have to choose 10 brushes, that will be perfect. So it's not random brushes, it's not random settings, it's brushes that take me like several days to work even from one of them. I make thousands of brushes and discarded a lot of them because they really don't work. So the only actual way to create personal brushes is to make them for yourself, that you really want to use them. And I think that's the key. So let me show you exactly how I do that. And now I want to recreate one of my favorite brushes. It's a free brush, so you can download it and see how the settings work. But I want to recreate it because I wanted to explain every single detail that makes it personal. So yeah, let's go to the table. There's a few things that define how a brush feels: the texture, the shape, and the settings. So let's start with the most important one. For me, the most important thing for making a brush feel personal is to use my favorite texture. They don't have to be always paper textures. They can be photos of terrain, fabric, concrete, anything with a surface that you kind of like. But for this brush, I'm gonna be using my Midori sketchbook. Right here, as you can see, I have a scan of the paper. It's just a tiny portion of the scan because otherwise you won't be able to see the texture. So what I usually like to do is, instead of taking photos, is to scan the paper. So if you can, and if you have a scan at home, try to scan it. Make sure that everything looks nice and there's no spots on the paper or anything like that. Choose a tiny portion of the paper and scale it, make it bigger. You can adjust the settings. So as you can see, I usually like to make the shadows to make it super contrasted, because that way it allows you to see the paper texture as it is. And also once you invert it, so with 2 fingers you can invert the texture in here, you will see it much better. Also, to make sure that the texture is seamless, you can go to auto repeat. So as you can see now, the whole pattern looks seamless. It looks like just one big photo. But if I go to border overlap at minimum, as you can see the tiles, the little tiles in here. So this auto repeat setting is something that you can use if the tiles don't look as even as possible. So put it at maximum. Maybe you can try to make it a little bit bigger, smaller. Depending on the pattern, it can be helpful to just change the other settings, but in this case, I will leave it like that. So first of all, I will show you the stroke path. In here, I like to change the spacing. I usually, instead of putting in 0, I like to give a little bit spacing. So as you can see, what it does, it creates a huge or a small spacing between the different shapes. And I usually like to put it around here, so it's not too dark or it's not too separated. But if you want to make stamps, just go to the maximum. Also, another thing that I like to touch is the lateral jitter. For example, in here, as you can see, it's perfect. But if you add some jitter, it starts to look a little bit less polished. So this setting is one that I also really like. So for the stabilization, this really depends on you. So in my case, I like to put just a tiny amount, maybe in here also too. This one is new, so that's why it wasn't activated. Let me show you what it looks without it. So if I make a circle and now we add the stabilization, as you see, it gets a little bit fixed, but just enough to make it look nice. So now it looks like all the lines look almost perfectly curved. That's something that you can use. If you want to make it even more perfect, you can increase the amount, but I usually like it to put it something around here. So for the taper, I don't usually touch many things. So one thing I like to do is to make the tip thin on both sides, and also the pressure and the tip just a tiny bit, because if not, it's over exaggerated and I don't like it at all. And there's also, to make the tip really fine, there's another thing here in the Apple pencil that I will show you later. So as you can see here, my tip is a little bit round because it's pencil. You can just exaggerate everything, but as you can see, it doesn't look as nice. It's like super pointy at the end. It doesn't look natural. So for a pencil brush, I think the ones I have it here it's much, much better. Each brush will have to have a different setting by its own, but in this case, for me, the pencil texture, it needs to have just a tiny bit of roundness at the end. So for the shape, I usually like to use, especially when starting, these shapes. Just try, as you can see, these ones are for free. They are here in Procreate and they have a ton of them. So instead of just making my own shapes, I usually start with one of these. And when I know what kind of shapes I want to use, I recreate it on my sketchbook. I use acrylics and all of that, making this kind of stamps and stains. So what's the difference between this kind of and this more soft, more round? As you can see, there's some kind of roughness going on in here, and this roughness is the same that in this outer side of here. So for example, if I was using just a medium hard, a little bit blurry, we have no roughness around that. We have this little tiny of roughness around here because we have this spacing. So if we have non-spacing at all, it's perfect. The spacing, as you can see, now it's like tiny round stamps. What you can also do is to change the rotation. As you can see, is the shape by itself rotating. So this is useful, maybe not for this one, but when you have a flat line, maybe you want the line to be in here, so you can choose the rotation of it. I also use this kind of scatter to make it more or less rough. And the count, as you can see, we have none, it's very light. So it's like adding one brush stroke on top of the other. You can also use the randomize, so it will randomize the shape. It's like doing tiny stamps. So every time it's randomizing, the stamp is gonna be changing and flipping. And you can also flip the stamp, as you can see. Here now it's like more soft because it's one on top of the other, but flipped. I don't know, it looks really nice, but depending on the kind of brush you want to do, you will have to change the settings. So for example, this one looks amazing too. This looks like a more softer version of my own brush. You can also change the direction, the rotation. It's similar to this one. And here I always put the improved one, just because it looks much, much better. Maybe not in here, but depending on the shape, you will see that it's less pixelated. So now, once again, on the grain, so I usually have this kind of samples on the side, so I can see how it looks like. So for the movement, it's like exactly what it means, that it has some kind of movement. So here, the texture looks too perfect. So sometimes giving it a little bit, so it looks like more smooth. The scale also the same, you can put it bigger and super, super tiny that it's barely any kind of texture. And the zoom is the same, so you have this kind of scale and now you are zooming on that scale. So I usually just play with these two until I like the kind of texture. The depth is also how much you can see the texture in here. So if you want texture and you have it in here, you won't have it. So it always needs to be at the maximum. And also you can play with the brightness and contrast. It's like adjusting the settings. The texture that you upload in here doesn't have to have the perfect settings, so you can retouch it later. As for this texturizer, it's really fun to play with it because it will create just a seamless texture everywhere. So this is perfect, especially when you want to do, as you can see, it looks like paper texture all over the place. So when you want to do texture paper, and for the background and all of that, you can use this setting here. But for regular pencils, just this one here. As for the rendering, I always have it on flow, like depending on the amount of ink that you want. So usually around 80% up. The wet edges and the burn edges, I usually use it when doing the watercolors. So in here, I won't touch anything. And the rendering mode, it will behave differently depending on this. Maybe the one that is completely different is the light glaze, that it's super light, but in here with this one, or maybe uniform blending. It looks really nice. It just has the nice amount of darkness and lightness that I want. So for the wet mix, in this case, since it's a pencil brush and not a wet brush like watercolors and all of that, I always disable everything. Also the same for color dynamics. This is useful if you want to change. As you can see, it's changing the hue. You can also change the saturation and make it look like it has like tiny bit of other colors and all of that, but I always disable this. Then dynamics, I think these are the default setting ones, so I just leave it like that. And here is the other really, really important one. So now for me, the most important one is the Apple Pencil settings. So this will allow you to control the pressure on the pencil. So in this case, we want the pressure, as much pressure as you can see. In here, I added more pressure than in here. So you can control this. So for example, something like this. As for the opacity, is the opacity on the tips. You can exaggerate it as much as you want, but I'm gonna put it on none because I wanted to show you what float is. Float does kind of the same, but more exaggerated. So it's like it has no ink in here. So just usually float just a tiny, tiny bit, and otherwise just put a little bit of opacity and play with that until it looks like a real pencil, and until it feels like it should feel a real pencil. Also, you can use bleed, but it's too much, so bleed usually is like 1% or something. So as you can see, this in here is kind of the same that in here. I usually don't like to put this because I just like to use other brushes for making this kind of effect. So yeah, I just usually have it on top of that, so it's like disabled. So as for properties, here is the maximum size. So this here will affect in here. So the maximum size will be here, how big it will be, and the minimum will be here, how small it will be. That really depends on you. So for example, in here, that actually breaks and it doesn't look right. So if you want to sell the brush and you want to make sure that everyone uses it as the size amount that it's supposed to be working. So for example, the maximum size in here, this looks nice. This still looks like a pencil, so I rather have it like here. The small one, it's way, way too small, so let's increase it a little bit. So something like this is nice. So yeah, you can have it now. The minimum is this big and the maximum is this big. So here, as you can see this line, that it's like kind of magnetizing to it. This is like saving a preset. So what you want to do, for example, you always want to have this kind, as you can see, I have this size. This is my favorite size, but if you want to have another one, you click in here and click the plus, and now you have this size saved, and you can change from one to the other super easy. The materials ones, I don't want to touch this because this is just for Blender and 3D. And the preview is how it will look on the back in here. The Procreate team have changed this, so now this is all new for me too. But this is super nice because now you can see how it will look. Instead, before you have to close it and look through the brush library. So now you can make a nice preview of the brush. And yeah, just touch everything that you want. You can see the stamp. The stamp is the shape. So if it's actually a stamp, you just click the stamp preview and you will see the actual shape of it. So this section is one of the most important parts because you want to save the settings. So every time you change a setting and go to the OK, it's going to be saved, but it's not permanent. So to make it permanent, just create a new reset point. And in case you want to undo what you have done, just go to the reset brush. So right now, if I reset the brush, it will be like the version you can download from my store. So for example, just create a new save point. And now, as you can see, the date has changed. So now if I just undo this and like, oh, and I saved, like, no. What did I have? I'm overreacting, but yeah, you can reset now the brush and it's gonna be resetting as the last save point. So yeah, that's pretty important. But also, if you have a brush that you really like and you want to keep it, just make sure that you duplicate it and just keep working on the new brush instead of just changing the other one. And every time you have a setting that you really, really like, just create a new reset point, make sure that you save it. One last thing is how to export the brushes. So you can export individual brushes like so. Just click on share and just share it wherever you want. Or you can export, like for example, this one here. You also can share it. So you can share the whole folder. And that's it. That's the process. It looks simple, but it's not that simple, because if you really want to make them personal, you will have to make a ton of them and discard almost all of them. But the ones that you will leave there, it will be the ones that you keep reaching to it and the ones that you can sell. So the brush I just made, it's free on my brush store. You can check it out. I will leave you the link down below. You can check all the free brushes I had. But if you feel a little bit lazy and don't want to really do all the work, I have a lot of brushes there. Especially, you should check my markers brush book, because it's the most, I think it's the best one I have, honestly. If you know me, I always draw with markers, but when I go digital, I can't do that. So I decided to make my own Copic markers brushes, and yeah, they are perfect. They look like my scanned works, and I'm so proud of that. So if you want to check them out, I will leave you also the link down below. But honestly, I think you should try making brushes. It's super fun, as you could see. It's not that difficult, and Procreate is really nice for that. So after recreating my brush, if you don't know where to start, just think about the brush you really want to use and try to make that. Then start using it on your own art and see how it feels, and if you like it, and if you keep reaching to it, and maybe if you do, maybe someone else will do too, so you can start selling it. So that's how the whole thing started for me. I made my favorite brush, and now it pays for my rent, and that's actually not bad. So yeah, that's it. I hope you find this video useful. Make sure to leave a comment down below, also like, check my store, all of that, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.